introduction. Ken went to school at Utah State. We only have Aggies here, I think. I don't know. There's probably a few of those other people here. But got his degree in public administration. He worked in Cache County for 10 years as a planner. Is that right? Short memory I have, he just told me. And then has been down in St. George for another 10 years. How long? 24 years. Ooh, that was off. And has been working for their has it always been a five-county association of government. So that's kind of their version of our brag. And we really appreciate him coming up. He was involved in their, I have a question. Was it Envision Dixie or Vision Dixie? Vision Dixie. That's what I thought. I always say it wrong. And so we want to know what he thinks about it after.
Thank you. And I appreciate the opportunity to be here this afternoon. I always love the opportunity to come back north. As was indicated, I grew up in Salt Lake, but as soon as I was old enough to leave, I did, and I haven't been back. Don't intend to ever live in Salt Lake City again. Came to Cache Valley to go to Utah State University, and graduated there in 1977 with a degree in political science, and had the great opportunity and fortune to do an internship at the Cache County Planning Office my last semester of undergraduate school. And by the time that semester was over, I had a full-time position during the summer, and it worked into a decade of experience with the Cache County Planning Office. Worked my way up to the county planner position there, and some of you in the room might remember that wonderful time in the mid-'80s when they decided in Cache Valley that we'd done enough great planning that they didn't need a planner anymore. And I went to green pastures in southern Utah. I took a job with the Association of Governments down in southern Utah, 5-county Association of Governments. Worked as their deputy director for 20 years, and then 4 years ago had the opportunity to take over as the executive director at the Association of Governments in St. George. Our staff there accomplished many of the same things that you heard from Brian here this morning here at with the Bear River Association of Governments. Many of the same kinds of programs, but my particular expertise and contribution to those efforts has been in the community planning side of things. We have been engaged in many different regional planning processes, among which are the Vision Dixie process that Alan described shortly this morning. We've worked with all of the programs that have been described here today. In fact, just this month we're kicking off another regional planning process with Highway 9, which is the highway that goes from Hurricane into Zion National Park and over the mountain to Mount Carmel Junction. That group of communities is engaging in a corridor management planning process with the ultimate objective of obtaining National Scenic Byway status. So we engage in many regional planning processes around southwestern Utah. And today I've been asked to focus on Vision Dixie and what's happening now that we've gone through that visioning process, and how are we actually getting it on the ground. You've heard some of the ideas here that are possible to actually make a difference in land use patterns on the ground after you've got that vision in place. I wanted to quickly just go briefly over the history of Vision Dixie and how we got to where we are to that implementation stage. And you had a great introduction to that this morning from Alan. Vision Dixie got its beginnings because of the efforts to finally put to rest the wilderness issues on public lands in Washington County. Washington County is about 74% federally owned and managed, the home of Zion National Park and many other recreational amenities, and hundreds of thousands of acres of the federal lands in Washington County have been proposed for wilderness designation, whether they be BLM or inside Zion National Park. And an effort was undertaken by the commissioners in Washington County to try and finally, after decades, determine exactly what that mixture of wilderness and other designations is going to look like in Washington County. And one of the initiatives that came out of that process was to engage the community in a regional visioning effort, which eventually turned into what we now know as Vision Dixie. And we did see that big list that was shown to you today of partners that funded that. And in my handout that you've got on your table, you'll see that Vision Dixie ended up costing more than $500,000 amongst all of those partners. It was a very intensive effort to make that happen. And Al, I don't know, is Vision Cache Valley about the same price tag, or $250,000? So that gives you an idea of the range of costs of a major visioning effort for a group of communities. So it's vital that you have that group of partners committed to helping with that visioning effort. The visioning effort in Cache Valley took about 18 months. Did I say Cache Valley? I did. I'm sorry, I'm going back to my beginnings. In Washington County, that Vision Dixie effort took about 18 months. Went through the process that you've all heard about this morning of getting the community engaged, having them sit around tables like this with maps and putting those chips on the maps, determining where they want the development patterns to go, melding all of those 13 meetings together into some kind of a scenario, and 4 scenarios were built and vetted with the community, and more than 3,000 people engaged in that process. The end result of that process was the development of 10 major principles that guide Vision Dixie. And those 10 principles are not on your handout, but you can find them at our web page, which is, the address is given on the flip side of that handout. You'll see information on contacts and our website. So you can go and look at those 10 governing principles for Vision Dixie. Those 10 principles are then taken out to the communities, and I sit on what we're calling the implementation team, which consists of a county commissioner, 2 mayors, a citizen, and myself, who, after the 10 principles were developed and introduced to the region, we went out to each of the individual communities at either a city council work meeting or a planning commission meeting to talk about the Vision Dixie principles and what these communities need to be doing to make these principles reality. As Brian indicated this morning, I think it was Brian's, or it might have been Evan's presentation, you're not going to accomplish anything if you don't do it at the community level, because the power and authority to make land use decisions is vested in your communities or your county in the unincorporated areas. So if your communities aren't committed to those principles, nothing's going to change. So our charge as an implementation committee was to go out to each of those communities, make sure that they understood what those Vision Dixie principles are and how they would work in their communities, and then to encourage those communities to do 2 major things. The first one was to formally adopt the Vision Dixie principles by resolution in a city council meeting. So formally on the record saying, we as a community agree with these vision principles and we're going to incorporate them into our planning processes. And we have about, I believe it's 19 jurisdictions in Washington County, and I believe at last count, 17 of the 19 municipalities have taken that step. They've adopted the Vision Dixie principles formally on record, saying that they want to accomplish those principles in their planning processes. The second major thing we did as an implementation team is to give each community 2 checklists, one about their general planning process and one about their ordinances, and tried to then tie the principles to what's going on with their planning processes and ordinances inside their communities. And then they were challenged to take those checklists back to a work meeting of their planning commissions and to go through the checklist to determine where the connections are working and where there's some disconnects in making these Vision Dixie principles work.